Okay. Hello. Hi there, everybody. I'm Pip, and I'm back. Tonight, I'd like to watch an after-school video on YouTube about the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi-sensei, How to Master Your Emotions. And so I'm hoping it won't take me a ridiculous amount of time to try to critique what I might find objectionable about the purported wisdom in this famed Book of Five Rings. So let's see if what I think about it. Um, of course, like in one sense, putting your opponent on the defensive, right, by threatening to stab his face, yeah, and making him dodge and be off balance, right, is a way to potentially win a sword fight decisively and quickly. But decisively, did I say that, or did I say decisely? Whoops, um, I meant decisively if I didn't say that, um, and um, but it's not necessarily going to be a victory in many battles. Right, to just stab as directly as you can towards the face. Right. Um, uh, Many opponents can parry and right, or deflect and dodge and right, counter strike right in ways that um, uh, a victory wouldn't be so summarily conclusive, right? Just by taking the proper initiative to be more deadly and threatening at the outset or something, right? Um, you may want to have the initiative and make your opponent react to your movements in many cases for strategic purposes, but I don't think anything so simplistic can be effectively described as the way to already win. Okay, let's continue. The Book of Five Rings. Emotion is a feeling we get when something happens to us. Um, Emotion is a feeling. A feeling is an emotion. An emotion is a feeling. Yeah, we get when something happens to us. Sort of. It arises as a consequence of all sorts of complex processes that are right. Um, it, that is sort of happened to us, but also sort of happened from us. Yeah. So I wouldn't phrase it this way, I don't think. But joy, sadness, anger, fear, okay, yeah. Example, emotions or feelings, yeah, okay. Um, when something stimulates us, it causes a sensation deep inside to bubble up to the surface. Um, Metaphorically, right, and maybe somewhat descriptively, right. There may be a sort of percolation or bubbling process, right, in organic thought processes, right, that um, incorporate wave dynamics and fluid at least simulated, but probably in small blood quantities and such, able to be sort of experimentally also right, um, evaluated and conducted in brain chambers or something. um, but so then deep inside, it causes sensation from deep inside to bubble up to the surface. Um, it might not necessarily be all that deep inside, though, either. I think that's probably a mischaracterization of the depth at which we're likely to find fear and joy. Like they're probably not all that deep, um, but perhaps they're mysterious enough that it makes them seem deeper than they might be. Oh, perhaps involuntary, automatic, out of our control. Wait. Um, Emotions and fears are not involuntary or out of our control. They're not automatic. They may feel as though they're coming from a part of your consciousness that you're unaware of, or you're not conscious of. You're subconscious, um, but it's still a thinking part of your mind that is making determinations, and there is volunteerism or voluntariness to um, the rest of your mind's ability to participate in thought processes that can percolate their way up to being felt and experienced um, in the conscious foreground of the mind. Ooh. Um, So I think it's a misrepresentation to say that that feelings and emotions are involuntary and automatic and out of our control. That to some extent that's true, but to a large extent it's not. And so I think it's a misrepresentation and ought to be contended against. People tend to deal with. Okay, they may probably tend to do one of those two things, but they could also do plenty of other things instead. And so I don't think those two are necessarily um, the best summary of the possibilities of what someone's likely to be reacting or responding with. Wait, you just called it a false paradox in which only one of two options exists. So you're on the same page with me that it is a false paradox. Then, right? That or I would say it's a false dichotomy. Also, right? But maybe you mean differently a paradox, and I mean dichotomy. Oh, okay. Perhaps, yeah. Because you see something, or Musashi-sensei saw something as paradoxical, and you're quoting him. Perhaps. Okay, let's see. Instinctual dilemma. Fight or flight against our own emotions. No, we don't really have fight or flight against our own emotions. It's a different kind of thing. Fight or flight is is kill or be killed, eat or be eaten. Right, like jungle food chain dynamics. Fight or flight. Right. Defend your life. Defend yourself from becoming food, or run away and flee and live to flee another day. um, but fight or flight against our own emotions doesn't seem to make sense to me in those ways. So I think maybe you just chose your words poorly on that, perhaps. No, reaction and suppression are responses. They might be unconscious impulses to you, and they might be conscious to other people, or liminal and on the periphery of what's barely discernible as being conscious, part of the conscious mind. Um, and so maybe being on that boundary or border, it may be appropriate to relegate them to being largely unconscious, but um, but I think subconscious is better to use in this instance, um, because unconscious implies that there isn't any consciousness that's making decisions or determinations or having reactions and emotions and feelings and impulses. But clearly, we are agents that have all of these body parts and types and parts of our minds that can suffer and struggle and need right to have expression for those things. So um, I think you're trying to say that reaction and suppression are not appropriate responses to um, emotions that arise that we don't understand why they came up or where they came from, I guess, is your assumption, or or your implication is that all emotions have no rhyme or reason to them, but that's ridiculous. Of course, there are catalysts and instigators and influences to cause emotional responses predictably and reliably and verifiably and observably. So that's asinine. um, so reaction and suppression are responses. Maybe you don't, we wouldn't prefer them, but uh, they are potentially quite valid responses to emotions that we ought to be reacting or suppressing. um, so and to say that they're merely unconscious impulses, if that's your implication, you're maybe trying to disparage them as though they're illegitimate because they come from a part of the mind that you're not completely aware of as it's operating, but that doesn't make it any less credible as a source of a cognition. Oh, so I don't think you should be so quick to to poo-poo away things as merely unconscious impulses, because like most of what you consciously think was a short time ago, those unconscious impulses that you're probably referring to. They just right can rise up all the way to awareness. Ew. This is how I see it anyway. That's what I think. Okay, lead us off the path to our destiny. So reaction and suppression, supposedly not responses, in unconscious impulses or subconscious, I think probably better, right? Subconscious impulses, which could lead us off the path to our destiny. Yikes. Um, okay, speak for yourself, not our destiny. We don't share a destiny. I have a destiny and you have your destiny, and so we're not leading us off our path, right, or our destiny. You could, right, have your unconscious impulses that you think are unconscious, and that lead you off your path to your destiny. But if you have a destiny, then you're on the path to it. So I don't see how reaction or suppression of emotions is supposedly going to lead someone away from what their destiny is. It doesn't seem to make sense or compute to me. Okay, but what if there's a third option that welcomes rather than fears emotions? Um, you said fear was an example emotion. You didn't say that emotions were feared. Now you're saying emotions are feared? What? Why? Who's fearing emotions? For what reason? I mean, I can understand fearing the fear emotion because, right, it is right. But fearing emotions generally, fearing feelings, what? You're you're it doesn't make sense. I don't get it. Yeah. What if there's another option that welcomes rather than? Of course, there's another option. You just brought up fears, right? For the first time here, you're you're assuming that emotions cause fear or are caused by fear, or are reacted to and suppressed because we fear feeling them, or because they come from a part of our mind that we don't understand well enough to trust enough to to embrace the feelings as they wash over us. I don't get it. What the heck are you talking about? How to master your emotions. Mimasaka, Japan. He began his. Oh wow, at 13, right? Undefeated, right? 60 duels, right? Musashi, maybe also referred to as the Bujin guy, perhaps. Yeah. The Book of Five Rings, Dokodo. The way for those who walk alone. The way. I I think his work could stand as self improvement and mastery, guiding light towards self improvement and mastery. It could be those. Maybe classically it has been more than it is these days. I would think it perhaps hasn't aged as well as it could have if, if taken seriously and critically and literally or as figuratively as it seems to make sense to it in the context at least. Um, but so I'm not saying Musashi Sensei is no guiding light. Obviously, I wish to pay him respect and regard for being probably the greatest swordsman who has yet lived, um, at least who has been tested by many deadly battles, as many as he had and had gone undefeated through, as the tale goes. So. Um, Yeah, maybe. Okay, yeah. Basics, flexibility, aggression, observation, and instincts. Okay. The five rings. Martial arts. It has themes of adaptability, intuition, self resilience. Principles that were relevant on the battlefield and remain relevant to this day. Yeah. Musashi's message is simple. Acceptance. Remove yourself from emotional desire and embrace emotional fortitude or something. Emotional fortitude. Because you think your emotions are governed by fears and desires that are illegitimate somehow and need to be quelled or quashed or suppressed or hindered or thwarted, right? Somehow, for some reason that I don't understand still. Yeah. What what is so dangerous about feeling emotions? Like, isn't I mean, yeah, you don't necessarily want to burst out into tears on a battlefield when right, life and death is at stake. I understand that, but it doesn't seem to follow to me that like emotions generally ought to be crushed and avoided and distanced from and misunderstood or to be fearing or feel threatened by. I think our emotions are opportunities to understand ourselves and what we're feeling, what we're going through, what our temperature, what our temperament is, and that's valuable information. Why suppress that if if that can inform you as to your state, your status, and your abilities, and your conditions, and your capacity. It's like, why ignore that? That doesn't make any sense to me. um, I think I'm already at 19 minutes, and what, I'm only 2.5 minutes into this 12-minute, 14-second video. Um, Obviously, I'm gonna need to break this into multi segments or something, but this is a taste of pedantic Pip, Pip the pedant, trying to cast a critical eye, a scrutinizing, magnifying lens glass to see if I can critique or challenge conventional wisdom or classic thinking about philosophy and how life should be organized or ordered. There's my phone. Uh, Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good night, and hopefully see you or talk to you again soon. Bye.